Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Point. Hope you're all doing well. It is a Monday. Happy to be back with you all. Was off on Friday. Got some new ink put on my body, so making my parents more and more proud by the day. Just to start the show, I'm a little bit under the weather, and if my voice sounds weird or if I'm a little nasally, if I sound like sinus, I apologize in advance. Been just started to get. I thought I went through it. I thought I wasn't going to get the flu, but it's starting to creep in, feeling worse as the day goes on. But it's a Monday. We have a lot to talk about, so I wasn't going to miss today's show. So I'm happy to be here. I'm fine. It's a cold. I'll get through it, as we all do. It's that time of year. So let's battle through this, and we'll hopefully have a good show today. So just bear with my voice and how I sound for today, and I appreciate your guys' understanding as we go through flu season, although it is December. It's not really flu season, so go figure there. But we have a lot to get into today. And 10 out of 10 times, I normally start a show on a Monday with NFL because that is where the news is. That's what just happened. You watch Sunday all day NFL. You have lots to get into. We're going to talk NFL today, but that's not where I'm starting. I'm starting today with the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and the reason I'm starting with this story is because I think it's very layered. I think it's an interesting developing story, and if you aren't familiar with it because you're not listening to UFC podcasts, this is something that's in the sports world. It's going to affect other sports, and I wanted to bring it up. And I also want to talk about what happened this weekend. So, for the past couple of months, different sports books around North America have been removing the UFC from their betting. Meaning, when you go to FanDuel, when you go to ProLine, wherever you gamble, normally it lists you off all the games, NHL, NFL, UFC, gone. For instance, this weekend, I wanted to bet on UFC 282. I use FanDuel, which is technically only allowed in Ontario, but we get around that. I could not use that app to gamble on UFC 282 because Ontario has removed them, has removed UFC. All of Ontario, you cannot gamble on the UFC. You can gamble on PFL, which is another league in fighting. You can gamble on One Championship. You can gamble on Bellator, not the UFC. Why is that? Well, in September, there was a fight, and it was a UFC fight night. It was a prelim, just a no-name fight if you're not a big fan, between two guys. And before the fight happened, there was a skyrocketing in betting. A guy went from a minus 190 favorite to over a minus 400 favorite before the fight. This never happens. A line will shift, but something to that magnitude is like a starting quarterback going down midweek. I mean, Lamar Jackson was ruled out on Friday for the Baltimore Ravens, just to put this into perspective, and the Steelers line only moved by half a point. Tyler Huntley was the starting quarterback, not Lamar Jackson. So two middle-of-the-pack fighters, and yet one rises to an over minus 400 favorite, which is staggering. It made no sense. So most sports books that night removed that fight from it completely. You could not gamble on it anymore because people thought the jig was up. Well, there was bets placed on that before they removed it from the sports book, and the big favorite had a body kick to a guy. He went down, seemed a bit fishy, and the fight was called off. So this sparked a little interest. Dana White had to address it, said it's not a big deal. It's not going to affect our product. But nevertheless, it got the attention of many people around the world, and clearly provinces like Alberta, like Ontario, New Jersey, which has one of the biggest gambling states in all of the U.S., removed the UFC for a period of time. Alberta has since come back, but they're still wavering. I don't think this weekend will help, which we'll get to in a second. New Jersey has since, but again, there's question marks. So there was that angle of thinking there's fixing fights. Then about 3 weeks ago, James Krause, who's a fight coach, trainer for a lot of big fighters, including Brandon the Assassin Baby Moreno, currently the undisputed flyweight champion of the world, who will fight Davison Figueiredo for that flyweight championship next month in Sao Paulo, Brazil. His coach, James Krause, was removed from the UFC, and any fighter that is associated with Krause cannot fight in the UFC. If you're being trained by him, you cannot fight in the promotion anymore. Why? Well, James Krause on the side set up a gambling of sorts where he had people sign up for a monthly promotion where he would recommend people where to bet. They pay him a monthly subscription. They go on to sports books, and they would gamble on the fighters that he recommended. He went on Ariel Helwani's podcast, the MMA Hour, which if you want to get even more information on MMA, I encourage you to go there. Great podcast. Also a Canadian, so great to see him continue to flourish. He basically said he's batting, if there's 15 fights a night, he said he's getting 12 to 13 right. Well, why is this a big deal? Well, NBA coaches, NHL coaches can't bet on other teams. Why? Maybe they know more information than the general public. Maybe they know about injuries, and they kicked this guy out of the UFC. He's done. He's being investigated. He's no longer affiliated. Excommunicado. See you later. So they have this fixing problem. They have this guy giving people tips on betting where he knows a lot more information than we do. So the UFC's under fire. And Dana White said it's not a big deal, even though he's lying, because almost every time he opens his mouth, he's lying. So the there's a lot of protests, and then there's the judges, which are always a problem. And we get to this weekend, UFC 282. I'm watching the event with my good buddy Aaron Brown. We've made some bets on the show. I did pretty well in the prelims. Darren Till screwed me with his torn ACL. But it's a really good show. Some awesome fights. Chris Curtis, awesome knockout of Joaquin Buckley. You had a great bout between Bryce Mitchell and Ilya Topuria. Topuria is legit. The guy's just a knockout artist, even though he won the fight via submission. Dude's undefeated for a reason. He'll be champion one day. Awesome event. Then we get to the co-main event featuring Paddy the Baddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. So, I'm watching the fight. It shouldn't be a co-main event because Paddy's not ranked, neither is Jared Gordon. Quite frankly, it's not a fight that's worth being a co-main event, but they had to throw this event together because of Yuri Prohaska's injury. John Jones didn't fight on the card. It's a good card, but again, it's a co-main event that doesn't have a whole lot of substance. So, we see the fight. It's going. Jared Gordon's doing very well against Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. He's having his way with him. The second round, he absolutely dominates the fight. And in the third round, he holds him up for the entire round. Paddy didn't have any offense. He grounded him. You could have argued that the ref should have stepped in, but he did not. I believe that ref for that fight was Mark Goddard, who is one of the best referees in the UFC. But watching the whole fight, it was not close. Jared Gordon dominated and he won the fight. I would have scored it 30-27. If you want to go 29-28, okay. But it was a 30-27 in my books, and most experts who score the fights on Twitter during the events, you see it when it pops up, said this was a clear win for Jared Gordon. We get to Brucey Buffer announcing the winner. All three judges score unanimous 29-28 in favor of Paddy the Baddy Pimblett. Joe Rogan, who can't hide his emotions, one of the few things I like about Joe Rogan, he can't hide his emotions. He eye rolls the decision on live pay-per-view television. And it's so clear what is happening here. Paddy is Dana's buddy. Dana was on Paddy's podcast last week where they berated Ariel Helwani, but he knows that Paddy is a cash cow, even though he's not that great of a fighter, but he talks shit. He promotes the fight. He's great at it. I don't take anything away from him, but he's not that great of a fighter. Paddy wins on 3 judges' scorecards. You can't tell me this isn't because he's affiliated with Dana White. Dana White's favorites win these fights. Jared Gordon is not well known, but he earned that win. He should have won that fight, and that should have been a loss for Paddy Pimblett in the UFC. But now he's 4-0, and it makes absolutely no sense. So based on what I told you from the jump, with what's happening with sportsbooks, and now seeing this result where Pimblett got his ass beat handily and he gets the win, Dana, based off the title today, Dana, what the fuck is going on? You got a problem. Because I don't care that you want Paddy Pimblett to keep winning fights because you can keep promoting him. You can put him on UFC London at the pay-per-view in March. Throw him on that card against Michael Johnson. Sure, it'll be a great fight. Okay, wonderful. But you don't have a sport if you don't have any integrity. If nobody believes what you're providing, it's seemingly now, any fight that goes to a decision seems to not make any goddamn sense. Any fight that's not won via knockout, via submission, the judges completely fuck it up. One of the 3 judges who rule on it, was doing a boxing event in New York the night before. You can't ask him to do 2 events in 2 nights, flying across the country to get to Vegas. Ariel Helwani, to his credit, pointed this out on Twitter Saturday night, which I give credit to him on this. This is not me coming up with this thought. But if you have no integrity in your sport, if sports books are backing out, guess what? You can still not pay your fighters anything because you want to make more money. Good for you. But guess people are going to back out if they don't feel you have any integrity in your sport. If they don't trust what you're doing. If your judges are out to lunch. This is a massive story because of the ramifications. A one-off bad judge's scorecard, okay, you can deal with that. It bothers me, but that's the sport. It's going to happen. If it's happening seemingly every event more than once, which it did, I'll get to the main event fight, which is also a fucking disaster. That's an issue. That's an issue because people aren't going to bet on something that they think they're going to get gypped on. Nobody in their right mind that knows anything about the UFC believes Paddy Pimblett won that fight. No one with a rational thought, and then Dana White had the unmitigated gall to come out after the event and said Jared Gordon screwed this up. He said, oh, Jared Gordon, you threw that 3rd round away. He was winning the fight. No, he did not. What did Paddy do in that 3rd round to earn any points? Okay, Gordon had him in control the whole 3rd round. Paddy did nothing to earn any points there. He did nothing. Gordon was 3 for 6 on takedowns. Paddy didn't attempt one. You are crushing Gordon because you know you have to save face because your buddy won a fight he didn't deserve to. Dana White looks more and more like a hypocrite the day goes on. He doesn't want to pay his fighters any money. He lies about what's actually happening in these events. He's a very good businessman. He is. But when your business is compromised, when your business doesn't have any credibility, You don't have any business because people will leave. People will not stick around if they don't think they have something to bank on. He's a great promoter. He realizes that, this isn't even the Sugar Sean O'Malley and Peter Yan fight. I agreed with Sugar Sean winning that. I think that was very close. I thought that was razor thin. If you wanted to rule that one a split draw, I could have dealt with that. This wasn't close. This wasn't razor thin. This was Jared Gordon earning a win. Paddy Pimblett getting a loss. So you get all that. Makes no sense. Then we get to the finale, the main event. For the light heavyweight championship between Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz. First round, Jan fights really well. I thought he won the first round. Second round, nip and tuck. Third, fourth, and fifth, I felt Magomed Ankalaev won those rounds pretty easily. He got Jan on the ground. He controlled him. Had some submission attempts. Ankalaev had control of the third, fourth, and fifth rounds. And the fourth and fifth rounds in a championship fight, those are championship rounds. They should be weighed heavier because they take more effort in those rounds. And we get to the decision. And this is a vacant title. This fight was thrown together 2 weeks ago because Yuri Prochazka injured his shoulder in training. And they rule it a split draw, meaning both fighters win, but both fighters lose because nobody goes home with the title. A split draw. Then Blachowicz goes on the mic and says, I know I didn't win this fight. Give the title to Magomed. Ankalaev is pissed, which I agree with. He says, I might not fight in this promotion anymore. His manager then came out and questioned Dana White and said, are you not putting the title on him because he's from Russia? Because of the war with Iran and everything that Ankalaev, who is kind of, he's Dagestanian, he's affiliated with some pretty awful people over there, which I don't support. But again, if you win a fight, you win a fight. So the two most important fights on the card do not go to the people that won the fight. So the light heavyweight title remains vacant. And then Dana White on the post-fight press conference goes on the mic and says, oh yeah, in a month in Brazil, the light heavyweight title, which is still vacant, will have another title fight between former champion Glover Teixeira, who lost to Prochazka in June, and Jamal Hill, who's been on a fight-winning streak. So now 2 title fights for the light heavyweight title in a month, and now we expect to see a new champion. The only problem here, folks, Glover Teixeira is 40 years old. If he wins that fight, he might win the belt and retire, so this belt might remain vacant. Just a clusterfuck of an evening by the UFC. Complete nonsense, anarchy, and this is one of the worst nights, in my opinion, of Dana White's career. Because he has nobody that likes his product, that is questioning it right now, saying, what's going on? You have no champion on your last pay-per-view of the year, which I thought was a great year for the UFC in general. The last 3 months was notwithstanding. So no light heavyweight champion. Paddy Pimblett, nobody believes he won. Where do you go from here? 2023 New Year's resolution for the UFC is reestablish credibility. They have an event this coming Saturday, Jared Cannonier against Sean Strickland. Middleweight fight. Should be a good one. So you have one more event to get through at the Apex. Snore. Apex fights, no crowd, which stink. And that's way too good of a main event to be fighting at the Apex, but that's another story for another day. But, come on. Your co-main event, which shouldn't have been a co-main event because it's not a co-main event fight, but you throw that on and you have Paddy Pimblett just win because you like him, because you go on his podcast, because he's a Dana guy, which is exactly why he won. Jared Gordon, a guy that most fighters wouldn't know. They know Paddy Pimblett. Guess what? In the NHL, in the NFL, The Toronto Maple Leafs and Dallas Cowboys don't just get to win because most people like them. You have to earn it. They haven't won in 50, 25 years. You know why? Because they haven't been good enough. That's how pro sports is supposed to work. You earn what you earn your championships. You earn your stripes. You earn credibility. Paddy Pimblett would still be a star. Guess what? You could throw him on the UFC card in London in March, and it would still be a big deal because he would still be Paddy. He's got to rebound from his loss. Let's see what he can do. But you want to build him up. And you want him to be champion. Paddy Pimblett's not going to be UFC champion. He's not good enough. He stunk in this fight. The hype around this guy. He's no Sugar Sean. He's no Conor McGregor when Conor McGregor was at his apex. I get it, Dana. You need your guys to sell fights. And Magomed Ankalaev and these guys aren't going to do it. So you can throw Paddy in a co-main event. But if one of your guys that you're just promoting openly isn't that good, then who cares? Also, I mean, you could also look at it. Conor McGregor hasn't won a fight in years. He's still a pretty big draw. Dana's already saying he's going to fight Michael Chandler when he comes back. That'll be a huge fight. UFC Fight Week in July. Make it happen. Yeah, people will buy that. Co-main event, whatever you want to do. 3 rounds. More and more provinces, more and more people, just, places around the world are not going to be putting UFC on their sites because they don't trust the product. They don't trust that when you make a bet that the person that deserves to win the fight is going to win the fight. So you can push this one aside and say that Jared Gordon threw the fight away, even though that's a bull-faced lie and you know it. And when it's bullshit when Joe Rogan and Dana White don't get along on something. That is a twist. That's when you know Dana White is lying. Because Joe Rogan gave the biggest eye roll. Go find it on Twitter. It was pure comedy to see him do this. And then Paddy goes on the mic and throws a dig at Ariel Helwani about paying for interviews, because I guess Paddy gets paid to do interviews now. Great. Good for him. Make your cheddar if you want to get paid to go do interviews. Good. But, he wrote, he said in his saying if people thought he lost the fight, they can kiss me arse or lick me arse, something of that nature. You lost the fight. You lost the fight, and you're not as good as you think you are. You just aren't. Judges, figure this out, Dana, because this isn't just a one-off UFC 282 problem. Many people thought the Sugar Sean fight, that was a bad ruling. That was in October. These decisions happen all the time. Some people were upset that in the Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira fight, that there was an early stoppage. That's a ref decision. But again, judges, refs, do a better job vetting them. You're the owner of the business. You have to have a say in all of this. These judges shouldn't be running these fights. If you got to get more involved, less involved to get it right, do it. I love your sport. But I don't love when I'm watching a fight and it's so clear who won it and that person just didn't win the fight. I went to bed Saturday night really disappointed with the whole event. Because the worst part of the evening was the last 2 fights. I loved the card prior to that. It was fantastic. But from 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock, it was a bunch of why did I just watch that? I watched 40 minutes of fights and I didn't get any resolution. I didn't get a sense of you know of acceptance, of closure. I watched Tapuria win. That was awesome. Dricus du Plessis from South Africa beat Darren Till. The guy can fight. He's a battler. He keeps winning these events. He's now in the top 10 in the middleweight division. He can fight the likes of Canier. He can fight the likes of Sean Strickland next, which will be fun fights. I watched an 18-year-old, Raul Rojas Jr., who was the featured prelim fight at 18 years, 2 months old, submit Jay Perrin in 2 minutes and 44 seconds. An 18-year-old dominate a fight. Youngest fighter to ever get a win on the UFC roster. That was amazing. The prelims were awesome. Yurinzo Rosenstrick knocked out Chris Daukaus in 23 seconds. I think you go Rosenstrick tied Tuivasa when Tuivasa wants to return. Chris Curtis, I mentioned his knockout of Buckley, was awesome. Cameron Saman, who battled in the early prelims, who beat Steven Kozlow. Both guys are making the UFC debut. Saman can go. Billy Carantino, one of my favorites, getting absolutely beat down in the first round by Alex Hernandez, knocks out Alexander Hernandez in the second round, comes back from the dead. That's the UFC. That's the fun. The last two fights absolutely wipe that away. You forget about it. And I wish that wasn't the case. Now, is the Glover Teixeira Jamal Hill a fun fight at UFC 283? Absolutely. Yes, but Jamal Hill's ranked 7th. He shouldn't be getting a title opportunity. Magomed Ankalaev should be champion. He should be fighting Glover Teixeira early next year for the light heavyweight title. And if Hill, who was supposed to fight Anthony Smith, who was actually working the event and learned that he doesn't have a fight in March, which he found out live on the air he wasn't getting a fight, which was pretty crazy to see. So it just sucked the life out of the whole night when it shouldn't have. Because Rojas Jr., Rosenstrick, Dricus, there was a lot of really cool things that happened and a lot of really cool fights that I think will be made following this event. But people will forget about the other stuff when the ending has nothing to it. The feeling leaving T-Mobile Arena on Saturday must have been a really empty feeling. Because that's how it was for me in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Just sitting there on the couch saying, well, that was a whole lot of nothing. No closure. Do better, UFC. Because I want to keep buying your product, but I don't like the way business was handled this weekend and too often how judges are scoring these fights. Now, Dana White and UFC might not have taken care of business the right way, but the San Francisco 49ers and Brock Purdy certainly took care of business this weekend, where Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, the new starting quarterback for the 49ers, showed up and showed out for his team yesterday in Santa Clara, California. Purdy did not throw for 200 yards, but he looked like a seasoned veteran in the 49ers' 35-7 victory over Tom Brady, the GOAT, and the Buccaneers. Purdy made very few mistakes yesterday. He made great throws when he had to. He used his skill position players. Christian McCaffrey was a beast all over the field. And he ran for a touchdown. He threw a couple touchdowns. And it was clear Mr. Irrelevant was head and shoulders better than Tom Brady yesterday. And there's no real debate about that. Tom Brady played awful. The Buccaneers offense is ranked 32nd in rushing. And to me, the only reason they're ranked 32nd in rushing is because they refuse to run the football. There's a lot of bad coaching this season, just like there's a lot of bad play. But I look at Byron Leftwich, who going into the season, you're thinking this guy might get a head coaching job. That is fading away. Because we see them run the ball early in the game. They're getting 8 to 9 yards a carry, and they just forget to do it. They have Rachaad White. They don't give him the football. He doesn't get touches. Leonard Fournette's not getting touches. It's just pass, pass, pass. Tom Brady throws over 50 times again yesterday. They put up 7 points. Couple things for Tampa you have to notice. Mike Evans had 1 catch in the first half. Chris Godwin's not the same player anymore. You have no tight end that is 100% reliable. Your offense doesn't have an identity. Their identity is that it's not very good. You don't have a deep passing game. You don't have an elite receiver on the outside. It's just a bunch of guys. And let's be clear here. Tom Brady is part of the problem because he is underthrowing a ton of guys still. That wasn't a hot take from me. That is just continuing to happen. Second quarter yesterday, under 3 minutes left in the half. He has Mike Evans on 4th down. Mike Evans is pretty wide open. He throws the ball way too early because he's not completely done his route yet, and he throws it low. He throws it at his feet. Incomplete, turnover on downs. What happens? San Francisco goes on a touchdown drive. Brock Purdy takes a deep shot to Brandon Ayuk. He's in for the score. Tampa has bad coaching, bad quarterback play, and yesterday their defense got torched. They're not a good football team. They're 6-7, yet they're the 4th seed in the NFC because each winner of every division makes the playoffs. To me, Tampa, I'm not 100% sure they're going to make the playoffs anymore. Because there's this team called the Carolina Panthers who maybe I'm still buying into this team because I bet them to make the playoffs before the season happened. But Carolina's had a crazy season. They fired Matt Rule. They cut Baker Mayfield. They traded away Christian McCaffrey. They cut DJ Moore. Or they cut Robbie Anderson. So much has happened to this team. Yet they are 5-8, which isn't good, but it's still 5-8. And they are a game out of first place in the NFC South. Not to mention, they have beaten Tampa in their only meeting this season. So as of right now, they would hold the tiebreaker with the Buccaneers for that division title. Looking ahead, the Panthers have the Steelers. Next week, the Bucs have the Bengals. Then the Bucs go to play the Cardinals in Arizona on on Christmas Day. Then they play the Panthers, and then they finish with the Falcons. It's not an easy schedule. I mean, the Bengals are a really tough game for any team right now, especially the Bucs, because they're doing nothing right. There's not a sub-zero chance that Carolina does not make Carolina upset the Seahawks yesterday. Huge win for that team. They have nothing fancy about them. They run the football. They got a really good defense, and Sam Darnold's not making mistakes. Steve Wilkes, who's an interim head coach, he's an interim coach. He wants to somehow keep that job in Carolina. I'm sure the owner is just despondent upon repair because he doesn't want this team to win. He wants them to get the first pick in the draft, but they have 5 wins, and now they're in a position where they won't even be picking, in the top 15 picks. They could make the playoffs. Not to mention the Falcons are also 5-8, so they're technically still alive. They're making a quarterback change this week to Desmond Ridder, so the rookie will start the last 4 games of the season. So there's a dogfight in the NFC South. Everybody's still in it. And if you look at it, the Bucs survived against the Saints in that game. They found a way to win that one. They've gotten a lot of good breaks this season just to be 6-7 because that team is awful. Awful. There's even reports before the game that Tom Brady is still mulling over his future, what happens next season. He's not playing that well, but he's still better than a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. There's a lot of bad quarterbacks out there. To me, I could see Tom Brady go play for the New York Jets next season. That would be my top pick. I look at that for Tom, where the Jets have a really good roster. They might still make the playoffs this year with no quarterback on their roster, even though Mike White played his ass off yesterday and got the hell beat out of him. He could look around and say, I got a top-notch defense with Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams, and some of these dogs that are here. CJ Mosley, who's kind of found his career again. Offense, I got Garrett Moore. I got Elijah Moore. So I got Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Conklin. We'll draft another really good offensive player. I could come here and play with these guys. Maybe Brady will want to go to Vegas. I think he wanted to go there before, but John Gruden kiboshed the deal, decided to stick with Derek Carr. I expect the Raiders to cut Derek Carr in the offseason. If they don't want to fire Josh McDaniels after his first season as head coach, Tom Brady and Josh McDaniels know each other very well. They worked together for over a decade as OC and quarterback, winning Super Bowls. Maybe it is San Francisco. I don't think so, because you have the whole Trey Lance of it all there. Maybe they bring Jimmy G back. Maybe Brock Purdy is still on this 49ers roster, had himself a go, taking this team to the playoffs, see how far they can go. Who knows? But I don't think Tom Brady's retiring. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons, but he got divorced because of football. One of the reasons anyway. Why retire after 1 year? Is one more year of football worth ending a marriage to the mother of your children? I don't know. I'm not married, but I expect him to play next year. Those are 3 teams that kind of I would put the Jets as the leading favorite to land Tom Brady in the offseason because I think Tom Brady would love to beat Bill Belichick twice a season as well. After the Jets haven't beaten Belichick in 5 to 6 years. For San Fran, they lose Deebo Samuel yesterday. He's carted off. It looked incredibly ugly, that injury. I wanted to come on and tell you guys the extent of it. I know it's a leg injury. They have not came out and said, he's done for the season. What's the extent of the injury? If I get that news on the podcast, I will relay it to you all. But, I mean, that's a soul-crushing injury, and that's so 49ers. The 49ers haven't been winning a Super Bowl the last number of years because they get this injury. It could be Deebo. It could be Jimmy G. In the past, it was Joe Staley, their all-pro left tackle, who they had forever. It always seems to be one of the most important members of their team goes down at an inopportune time. To me, Deebo is the most important player on that offense. He brings so much versatility. I expect the news to be that he's done for the season. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm expecting to hear today. So with that, you still have Ayuk. You still have George Kittle. Elijah Mitchell is going to be out for a number of weeks. Christian McCaffrey had over 140 yards rushing yesterday. He's used in the pass game. He's going to have to be a monster for this team. He's going to have to be even more versatile. He's going to have to be used even more. And maybe that's exactly what he wants. Maybe that's where he sees, himself being the most explosive, getting more touches on this team. They traded for him for a reason. He needs to be really the sole focus of this offense. Yes, you have Ayuk. Yes, you have Kittle. Jawan Jennings is a good player. But Christian McCaffrey opens up so many things for this team. And even with the Deebo injury, even with the Lance injury, even with the Jimmy G injury, I still give this team a chance to go deep into the playoffs because of just the fortitude, Kyle Shanahan's brilliance on offense, and the defense. They still have Fred Warner. They still have Nick Bosa, who to me is the defensive player of the year. Hofanu, Kinlaw, Greenlaw, who got an interception off Brady yesterday. This defense gave up 7 points to the GOAT. In garbage time, doesn't even count that touchdown. They swarm to the football. Fred Warner is one of the best players in all the NFL, period. Offense, defense. He's so good at his position. Their defense can keep them in games. I don't think Brock Purdy will play as good as he did, yesterday, the rest of the season. But the 49ers are 9-4. They have a 2-game lead in the NFC West over Seattle after Seattle lost to aforementioned Carolina, and the two teams meet on Thursday night. Brock Purdy knows his role, and the biggest thing I took away from yesterday's game, he did not look afraid. He took a deep shot to Ayuk with 23 seconds left in the half, and that was a tricky throw. It was a gutsy throw, and he still made it. Why? Because he has that confidence. It's just in him to try that throw to me. It's built in him. Yes, you're in an offense that doesn't require that much, but he still took that shot and it prevailed. He's not afraid to make a mistake, which I credit him for. To me, they're just one of the best teams in the NFL. Brock Purdy's not a top 10, not a top 15 quarterback. But neither was Jimmy G, and this team got to the NFC Championship game last year. And if Jaquiski Tartt intercepts Matthew Stafford, they're in the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 years. And we're talking about an NFC where I think you fear the Eagles, you respect the Cowboys, but does anybody else fear you? Do the Cowboys fear you? Yesterday, the Cowboys won a game where they defeated the Houston Texans 27-23. They were 18-point home favorites, and Houston covered easily, and the Cowboys were lucky to win the game. Now, everything's good. You play games that are going to be close. You play games that you should dominate, that you just squeak out a win. We get that. But come on. The Houston Texans, who are rotating quarterbacks between Jeff Driscoll and Davis Mills, who have one win on the season, and you barely squeak out a win against Houston. Dak Prescott does not throw for 170 yards. I don't know. I still think the Cowboys are a really good team. I've never been the biggest Dak Prescott fan. Now, Cooper Rush is not better than Dak Prescott. Don't let anybody tell you that. But they got talent over the field, and they just seem to find ways to screw it up. That's the Dallas Cowboys' way, is to screw it up. We talked earlier. UFC, you earn your championships. Yeah, Dallas Cowboys have not been earning a championship for 25 years. Toronto Maple Leafs for 50. That's the way it works. You got to earn everything. I think their defense is still really good. Micah Parsons hasn't played that well the last couple weeks. They still got great offensive weapons when they want to use them correctly. But I look at it, I got the Eagles number 1 in my NFC power rankings. 49ers are now 2. And Cowboys are 3. Because Dak is better than Brock Purdy. But I don't think Kellen Moore is a better play caller than Kyle Shanahan. I don't think Dan Quinn's a better defensive coordinator than DeMeco Ryans. I think Nick Bosa is as good or better than Micah Parsons. Fred Warner is better than any defensive player other than Micah Parsons on the Dallas Cowboys, and they have a lot of really good defensive players. Trayvon Diggs is a good player. He's not as good as Fred Warner. He's not as good as Eric Armstead, I would argue. So for the Cowboys, you got the Jags next week. Then you have the Eagles on Christmas Eve. That's your season. They're 10-3. And to me, the Eagles are not going to lose many games down the stretch here. Maybe they'll lose to the Cowboys. Maybe that happens. It is in Dallas, and they'll get up for that game. But what I can say about the Eagles, because this coming Sunday they're at the Bears, they'll cruise to a victory that day. And I mentioned they're at the Cowboys on Christmas Eve, which is the featured game that day. That I think the Cowboys will be favored in that game. Then the Eagles got the Saints at home. The Saints stink. So 2 really winnable games there, and then they finish against the New York Giants, who they torched yesterday. So I don't. At worst, I think they go 3-1 in their last 4 games because they've shown nothing to me that would say that the Saints or the Bears or the Giants would beat the Eagles. And the Eagles play the Saints at home and the Giants at home. Plus, Jalen Hurts has been the best, you could argue, player, by far the most consistent quarterback in the NFL this year. Jalen Hurts, this is the only quarterback I can say this about, has not had a bad game this year. They lost to the Commanders. He did not have a bad game. He completed over 65% of his passes. They had drops that game. They had 4 turnovers, none by him, I'll add. 1 by him. 3 fumbles other than that. He has not had a bad game. They have 1 loss. He's played flawless football. He's running the football. He's throwing touchdown passes. Him and A.J. Brown are torching the league. Devontae Smith is getting big grabs. He's making gutsy throws. He is the MVP, and he's the only quarterback in the NFL that has not had a bad game. So yes, do I think the Cowboys are a tough opponent because of their pass rush and because of some of the challenges they present? Sure. But do I think the Eagles could go into Dallas and win that game on Christmas Eve? Absolutely. Do they have 1 loss in the regular season? I could see it. To me, they are going to be the team that gets the bye. They will get the bye because the Vikings lost yesterday. The 49ers have 4 losses. You're going to need a lot of help there. The Cowboys have 3. Cowboys can hope that they beat the Eagles and the Eagles lose another game. But the Cowboys are at the Jaguars, which, yes, they'll be a favorite. But that's not a gimme win for the Cowboys. The Jaguars are playing better football. Trevor Lawrence had a hell of a game yesterday against the Tennessee Titans. They also got the Tennessee Titans on a Thursday night. And then they finish with the Washington Commanders, who are always a tricky opponent because they always come to play. The Eagles have a great secondary. The Eagles have the best 1-2 receiving core in the NFL minus the Dolphins, but it's real close. Tyreek and Jalen Waddle are great, but I love the mix of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And they're going to get Dallas Goedert back before the playoffs at the tight end position. And Miles Sanders has over 1,000 yards rushing already on the year. He's playing really solid football for the Eagles. They have the best offensive line in the NFL. It's something about this team. They have 1 loss, and it didn't affect them. They came out the next week, and they found a way to beat. It was an ugly win against the Colts. I don't care. He didn't play bad in that game. Jalen Hurts is the MVP. Their defense always shows up, always plays well. Their team is always in coach well, in good position. We've seen hiccups from the other great teams. The Bills have had hiccups. The Chiefs are going through one right now. The Bengals had a slow start to begin the season. The Eagles have never had one. Now, you could look at that and say, well, that's a bad sign for the team because, eventually they'll have their hiccup in the playoffs. Says who? Why does that have to be the case? Why can't you just dominate the league the whole year? They were in the playoffs last year. They took a beating. They really improved their team. Their quarterback got a hell of a lot better. Maybe they're just a team of destiny and they go all the way and find a way to win. Maybe it's not the negative side of things here, and it's just, you know what? They're that damn good. We have a team that want to get healthy after the next 4 weeks. You get a bye. You sit there. You wait for an opponent. Maybe you catch a break and you get the Buccaneers or you get the Panthers because they host a home playoff game. They're not very good, so you smoke them. Then you're one win away from the Super Bowl. You beat the 49ers or you beat the Cowboys, and before you know it, you're in a Super Bowl game. Doesn't sound so bad. Credit to the Philadelphia Eagles. They seem to have hired a really good head coach in Nick Sirianni. A lot of questions before. He's been a good hire. Howie Roseman is a great GM. He knows how to draft players. He knows how to find talent. Not to mention they have the Saints' first-round pick, which is looking better by the day. It might be a top 10 pick, so you're a team that could possibly win the Super Bowl. And then you have a top 10 pick to help your team going into next season with a rookie quarterback still under a rookie deal that you don't have to pay a lot of money to yet. Sounds pretty smart to me. Sounds like good business. Credit to the Philadelphia Eagles and what they're doing there. Okay, where do we go from here? Detroit. Oh, Detroit. I'm happy for Detroit for a number of reasons. Number one reason, I had Detroit before the season, made this bet in July. Detroit over 5.5 wins. They now have 6. I also still got a Jaguars bet that's hanging around. They need one more win, and I'm there with them. So the Jags hang around. But Detroit, who were 1-5 at one point, Dan Campbell on the hot seat, the owner had to come out and say, no, I'm not going to fire anybody. We're sticking with this group, with our GM, with our head coach. And now here we sit with the Detroit Lions at 6-7, and they have a realistic path to get to the postseason. The Lions beating the Minnesota Vikings yesterday, and they were a favorite going into the game, and they validated that for Vegas, where they, if you watched the game yesterday, it really was not that close. Minnesota scored a late touchdown, which made the scoreboard look closer than it was. But Minnesota never had a pulse in that game. After the second quarter, when Jared Goff hit DJ Chark on a long touchdown pass, they never found it. It was 34-23. And to me, just the Lions, they're not making many mistakes right now. Their defense is coming up with turnovers. They're getting fourth down stops. Jared Goff is playing efficient football. They got a great nucleus of running backs in Justin Jackson, who came over from the Chargers. They still have a Swift and Jamal Williams. So they have a three-headed monster at running back. Amon St. Brown is a stud. Pair that with Josh Reynolds, who's now healthy. They trade away TJ Hawkinson. They're still winning games. He's with Minnesota. Dropped a fourth down yesterday. This Lions team is playing with heart. They're playing with pride. And they got a quarterback in Jared Goff who's playing the best football of his career. He's slinging all over the field. He's playing with confidence. And this team just has a lot of really good skill players who are producing at a very high level. The Lions got the Jets remaining. They got the Packers. I know there's a couple of their games left. They got the Jets. They got the Packers. And they still have another division game. They've definitely got the Bears one more time. So they have 2 division games left. They got the Jets at the Jets next week. And one other game that I'm going to try to find for you guys here quickly. 6-7. Jets are 7-6. Interesting game. I think the Lions are going to win that football game. They'll go in New York and they'll win that game. They will beat the Bears. They might play that game. I gotta find out who the Lions play on Christmas Eve. But they will beat the Bears. They might play the Bears in their last game of the year. So yeah, the Lions at the Jets. Then they got the Carolina Panthers. Oh, what an interesting game that is. They're at Carolina. It's a spicy game on Christmas Eve. A little 2:00 kickoff. Who knew that I would be interested in that game? I couldn't be more interested in that game Christmas Eve. No family time, just watching that game. Then they finish with the Packers and with the Bears. Bears and then Packers to finish the year. Next, they're going to win next week. That makes them 7-7. I think they'll go to Carolina and win that game. They're 8-7. Then they got the Bears. They'll be 9-7. Then they go into the last game of the year against the Green Bay Packers. Who knows if Aaron Rodgers is still playing it at that point? Green Bay has the Rams this coming Monday, a week from today. Then they're at the Dolphins. I'll be at that game. So Green Bay's 5-8, so they're still hanging around themselves. I think the Lions are going to make the playoffs. I think the Lions will be a wild card team. And that's a team you don't want to play in the playoffs, if you ask me, because they believe they're hard to play against. They're physical. And if you're the Minnesota Vikings, who could very well be the second seed in the NFC, you play 2 games against the Detroit Lions this year, and you are -8 in point differential in those 2 games. Minnesota's 10-3, but they're the least confident 10-3 I've ever seen. Because they have Justin Jefferson, and that's about it. Kirk Cousins on defense, their defense gives up big play after big play, so their offense has to overcompensate. They couldn't run the football yesterday, so it was a one-dimensional offense with Kirk Cousins, and Justin Jefferson had the most receiving yards in a single game in Minnesota Vikings history, and they still got crushed by 11. They find ways to draw passes. Kevin O'Connell just seems to make crappy decisions. On the fly here, NFC power rankings earlier. 1, Philly, obviously, Eagles. 2, 49ers. 3, the Dallas Cowboys. 4. No, on paper you go, well, Minnesota should be 4 because technically they're number 2 in the NFC. They're the second seed. They're certainly not my number 4 because I don't trust this team at all to win a big game. Sure, they beat the Patriots on Thanksgiving. Way to go. The Patriots aren't that good. Maxwell House. They got crushed by Dallas in a big game. They got crushed by the Eagles in week 2. Teams you're going to have to beat in the playoffs. But I look in the NFC, there's not that many great teams. Tampa's the 4th seed right now. If I look at Washington, the Giants, Seattle, I would have Detroit maybe number 4 in the NFC in my confidence ranking right now. If you look at it, I have Philly, San Fran, Dallas at my top 3 just confidence rankings. 4, give me the Detroit Lions. I have more faith in them over Minnesota, over Tampa. My God. I love Washington. I do. Green Lizard. Hate their owner, but I love the Green Lizard. The Giants, I don't have faith in the Giants. My God. Green Bay, no. Carolina, no. Atlanta, no. It's not crazy to say that you have Detroit as the team you're 4th most confident in to win a big game in the NFC right now. It's not a hot take to me. It's not crazy. They are that good. And I bet on them. They have over 5.5 wins. They got 6. They got 4 games left. Jets, Panthers, Bears, Green Bay. They're going to win their last 4 games. Detroit will win the last 4 games. You heard it here first. Detroit will finish the season 10-7, and the Detroit Lions are going to make the playoffs. If you look at it, Washington, New York play each other this week, Sunday Night Football. One of them will win or tie again. So let's say one's 8-5-1, one's 7-6. Detroit will be 7-7. Seattle is playing San Francisco this week. Oof. They'll likely lose that game. They're 7-7. There you go. Detroit's tied with Seattle. I think Seattle beat Detroit earlier in the year. They did. So they'd own that tiebreaker. But I think Detroit at 10-7 will have a better record than Washington, then New York, and likely Seattle. I think Detroit, at the end of the day, will be the 6th seed in the NFC because they will pass Washington, New York, Seattle, any of that combination. And I think Washington, I think this is how it's going to finish. Philly, number 1. Minnesota is currently number 2. They're at 10-3. Do they lose enough games that San Francisco could possibly pass them? Let's go through this. Minnesota has the Colts on Saturday. They'll win that game at home. Colts. Come on. Then Minnesota has the Giants. It's not a lock win, but I do think at home, yeah, they probably win that game. So, and then they go to Green Bay on New Year's Day. That's no lock win. They finished. I think they lose one. Maybe they lose to Green Bay potentially, but I could see them winning their last 4. They finish 14-3. So I don't think so. So I think it'll be Minnesota. It might be San Francisco versus Detroit in the playoffs, which would be a fun, physical football, just a playoff game. But I think Detroit will be the 6th seed at the end of the day. I think they win out. I think they make the playoffs. I think the Commanders get that 7th spot. Because Seattle has San Francisco. They have to play Kansas City down the stretch. I would love to see Geno Smith make the playoffs. I just think their schedule's really tough. Yeah, they got to play the Chiefs on Christmas Eve. Then Seattle, they finish with the Jets. Jets will be frisky to win that game. They won't give in. They'll still be in the mix. And Seattle finishes with the Rams. Of their last 4, their only gimme win to me is the Rams game. Other than that, you look at San Fran, Chiefs, Jets. Those are all games that they could lose. They had to win against the Carolina Panthers yesterday, and they didn't. That's a massive misstep by Seattle. Now, I will say they got San Francisco Thursday night. That's the biggest game of your season. By far. You're at home against the 49ers. You might win that. You got to find a way to win that game. Because I don't think you're beating Kansas City. And if you can beat San Francisco, beat the Jets, beat the Rams, you go 3-1, you'll make the playoffs. You will be 11-6. You'll make the playoffs with the Lions. But you need to find a way to win Thursday night against the 49ers. Period. That's Seattle's path to the play. There's 4 games left, guys. That's all that's left. It's going to go crazy fast because we have the Christmas break coming up and all of that. And you got weekend games on Christmas Eve and on New Year's Day, so you forget about it. Before you know it, the playoffs are going to be here. And I'm just trying to break down scenarios here today as we look at it. Now, AFC, I was really disappointed in the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday. They had a 27-0 lead. They nearly let Denver, let's ride, come back and catch them. But Denver's offensive line was so brutal. Russell Wilson got sacked 8 times yesterday and then had to leave the game with a concussion. But Patrick Mahomes had a brutal game, threw 3 interceptions. One of them was just a great play by Jewel, but the other 2 you just can't have. Kansas City's had a couple bad weeks in a row. This seems to happen to them every year, so that concerns me a little bit. But if we look at the AFC, currently, Buffalo's at 10-3, Kansas City's at 10-3. If Buffalo wins out, they will be the first seed because they beat Kansas City head-to-head. Buffalo's got the Dolphins this Saturday. So, the Dolphins, we'll talk about them in a second. They're sliding right now. But, Buffalo's got the Dolphins. They got to play Cincinnati on a Monday night, which is a great game on the second to last week of the season. That could mean a whole lot because you still got Cincinnati's 9-4, so they're a game back of Buffalo. So potentially Cincinnati could leapfrog into that top spot. But let's look at those teams quickly as we run through this here. Kansas City, I know they got Seattle. This weekend, Kansas City's got the Texans. Then they got Seattle. Week 17, they got the Broncos. Let's ride. Russell Wilson might not even be playing. I don't care if he does. They won't lose that game. And Kansas City finishes with the Raiders. I don't know if Kansas City loses another game. I don't think they do. They win against Houston for sure. They win against Denver, lock. Seattle, I think they win that game. They're at home for that. Or they might be in Seattle for that game. No, they're at home. They won't lose that game. So I don't think Kansas City loses another game. So that would mean that they go 14-3. For the Bills, like I said, they're home to the Dolphins this Saturday night. Then they go to the Bears. I like those two wins. On January 2nd, what a January 2nd that is. You got the World Juniors that day, quarterfinals, and you got Bills, Bengals, Monday Night Football. Get me to a sports bar after those games. Bills, Bengals in Cincinnati. And then the Bills finish at home to the Patriots. 3 of the 4 lock wins to me for the Patriots. I don't think the Dolphins will win this weekend in Buffalo. We'll talk about lines later in the week. That Cincinnati game's huge because the Bills, I think, they're going to either be the number 1 seed, how I look at this progressing, or they will be a number 3 seed. Because if the Bengals win that game, they'll be 10-4. So they will be 13-4. So will the Buffalo Bills. But winning head-to-head would mean that Cincinnati leapfrogs the Bills. So that's how I don't see Kansas City losing another game. They need Cincinnati to help them in order to get that bye to the first round. So interesting there. But to me, the Bills and the Chiefs are both playing worse than playing mediocre football right now. And to me, the Bengals are by far the more superior team. Yes, they only won by 13 points yesterday against the Cleveland Clowns and Deshaun Watson, but it was a physical game. They found a way to win it. It's a divisional game. I give them credit for winning that game the way that they did. Joe Burrow had never beaten Cleveland. He beat those demons. He got past that team, got past the other Ohio team. So AFC, I still got to stick with Kansas City 1. I still got the Bengals 2. I have the Bills 3 in my confidence rankings. But at home, Monday Night Football, the second to last week of the season, that's a must-watch game and has huge ramifications on where this goes. AFC right now, Tennessee is the 4th seed. They're 7-6. They are reeling right now. They have lost multiple games. They got crushed by the Jags yesterday. The Jags are 5-8. The Jags are 5-8. They got the Cowboys this week. They're at home to the Cowboys. It's unlikely to win, but if the Jags win this week, the Jags will make the playoffs. Because Tennessee will be 7-6. They win the game, will be 6-8. Tennessee's reeling. They're not playing good football. They're not confident. They're getting the hell beat out of them. Tennessee this week, they have they're in LA to play the Chargers. They'll lose that game. Chargers, I think, will make the playoffs. Now, wait for that for a second. Jaguars got the Cowboys. Then they go to play the Jets on a Thursday night, which is interesting. Tennessee will play Houston. That's an easy win at home, so they got a cupcake game. Then the Titans host the Cowboys in the last Thursday night football game of the season. Jags got their Texans, so they got their cupcake game. And then in Week 18, they play one another. So it could come down to the last meeting of the season. But to me, if the Jags win this week, they can find a way to upset the Cowboys this weekend. Jags will make the playoffs. Tennessee will miss, which is always interesting to see how these things shake out. But that's how I see it going there. But for AFC, my confidence rankings in the top 3 are easy. After that, I don't have any faith in the Chargers. Yes, the Chargers won last night, and I liked the way they played. They were missing offensive starters. And I'll even put it this way. There's no debate who the next great quarterback is in this conference. It's Justin Herbert. He's better than Tua. He's better than Ryan Tannehill. He's better than Mike White. He's better than Mac Jones. He's better than Derek Carr, Deshaun Watson. I might put the Chargers forward, but I have no faith in that team. They find ways to fall on their face. But they won a game last night that they would normally lose. The old Chargers with Phillip Rivers, even the past number of years, they'd find a way to lose that game. They won it. They beat the Dolphins at home in a must-win game. Chargers are now 7-6. 7-6. They have the final wild card spot. Like I said, they got the Titans next week. They don't have to play the Chiefs again, which is their biggest advantage for the Chargers. They do not get them again. I don't think they got the Raiders again. They have the Broncos one more time, which is perfect. But the Chargers got a favorable schedule. They got the Titans at home. That's a difficult game, but one they'll win, in my opinion. They got the Colts on a Monday night. That's a dome, not cold weather. They'll win that game against the Colts. So I think that's 2 wins. Chargers then play the Rams on a Sunday night. Again, Baker Mayfield, maybe the Rams have found something. I think that's more of a, lightning in a bottle. And then they go to the Broncos. Chargers will win out. Chargers will be 11-6. Chargers are making the playoffs. I'm making all these predictions today. I don't like making massive predictions, but I'm just looking at the schedule and how I see it playing out. I have to. So then where do we go? Well, there's the Miami Dolphins, who are now 8-5. Soon will be 8-6 because they're going to lose the Buffalo Bills this weekend. That means they'll be 8-6. Chargers will be 8-6 because I think, as I said, if the Chargers win this weekend. Miami then has Green Bay on their schedule, which I'll be at. Green Bay won't be giving up. They'll still be alive in their season. They'll still be trying to make the playoffs. Coming off a bye, I think the Packers got a pretty easy game this weekend. Packers got the Rams on Monday night, actually. So I think it's not an easy game, but it's not exactly the toughest opponent in the world. But the Dolphins, they got the Bills, then they host the Packers on Christmas Day. It's a winnable game, certainly. I don't think it's a lock win. Then the Dolphins go to play the Patriots. Patriots will be playing for something. In particular, if they win tonight, Patriots, if they win tonight, they're 7-6. They're right there in the mix to make the playoffs in the AFC. And then the Dolphins finish with the Jets, who they lost to earlier in the season. So there's no lock. To me, in the AFC and the bottom of it, I have the most confidence making the playoffs right now. I have the Chargers. Miami is going to be a dogfight. They need to find a way to win that Green Bay game. If they beat the Patriots, they beat Green Bay, and they beat the Jets, they finish 3-1. They'll be 11-6. They'll make the playoffs like the Chargers. Chargers will be 11-6. Chargers beat them head-to-head. And to me, the Miami Dolphins will be the 7th seed in the AFC, and they'll likely either face Kansas City or Cincinnati in the playoffs. Which I think if you polled most Dolphins fans before the season, you take that. It's not ideal. You're going to be a heavy underdog going on the road. The way the season looked originally, you might be able to win a division title. That's not going to happen anymore. But making the playoffs, that is a win for Dolphins Nation. Now, there's still Baltimore here. Baltimore and Cincinnati are both 9-4. Let's go through Baltimore's path here. Baltimore is 9-4. Lamar Jackson is unlikely to play next week, already talked about. Tyler Huntley left the game yesterday with a concussion. So he'd have to clear concussion protocol and play this week. And they play on Saturday. So that's one last day to prepare for the game. The Ravens are at the Browns this coming Saturday. So it could be Anthony Brown at quarterback, which isn't. I think the Browns will win that game if he's not playing. So, I mean, the Ravens are 9-5. Cincinnati would leapfrog into first in that division. Then the Ravens got the Falcons on Christmas Eve. Lamar should be back. So let's say you're 10-5. Then the Ravens got the Steelers. Steelers are Kenny Pickett. Who knows? He got concussed yesterday, but again, concussions. It's a tough divisional game. I think you can win that one. Let's go 11-5, and then the Ravens finish with the Bengals. No gimme win at all. So you could have the Ravens, Chargers, and Dolphins all make the playoffs at 11-6. That's how I'm going to predict. Ravens, Dolphins, and Chargers are the 3 wildcard teams in the AFC. In the NFC, the wildcard teams will be Detroit, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Washington Commanders. Seattle could do it, but that I just don't think they'll have enough firepower to manage that. But it's so interesting. So interesting. Lots of different predicaments. What happens with Deebo Samuel moving forward? What happens with a lot of these teams? Tonight, Patriots-Cardinals is not exactly the sexiest Monday Night Football game, but the Patriots need this game badly. The Patriots are 6-6. The Cardinals are a reeling football team. They're coming off a bye. Patriots, they need to win all these games down. They got 5 games left. They need to win every one of them. Need to find a way to win these games to stick around in the AFC wildcard hunt, to remain in the playoff mix. Looking at tonight's game, I think the Patriots will find a way to win tonight, but if looking at their history on Monday Night Football, they'll lose this game. They'll lose this game. Primetime games, they've been losing them. They lost to the Bears on a Monday night, if you recall. They lost to the Vikings on Thursday Night Football on Thanksgiving. There's something weird about the Patriots on Monday Night Football, it seems, but the Cardinals are not a good football team. The Patriots do have a good defense. So if I was betting, I would take the Patriots tonight because I think the Patriots are just a better team. Now, I should be back tomorrow, all things considered, with health. Hopefully I'm feeling better. Well, tomorrow, Seamus should be on. We'll talk some NHL. We'll talk a number of things in the sports world with him. So get ready for that. We'll talk, some big stories from over the weekend, some baseball news as well. With the Blue Jays finally made a move. They signed Kevin Kiermaier. The Mets re-signed Brandon Nimmo, 8 years, $162 million. Blue Jays fans, it's a good thing you didn't re-sign him. You didn't sign him. He's not worth that many years and that amount of money. David Robertson also goes to the Mets, 1 year, $10 million. The Mets are just spending money like crazy. It's wild what they're doing with their money. But good for Steve Cohen. He wants to win a World Series, but it's kind of at any cost right now. But we'll get back into the NHL of it tomorrow. Seamus is on. I want to talk New Orleans Pelicans. Zion Williamson is absolutely dominating the NBA right now. His antics Friday night, I don't think had any bearing, but I want to talk about that. We'll also talk about NBA head coaches on the hot seat because we are into mid-December. So I kind of want to get into that with him as well. So we'll talk to you tomorrow here on To The Point. Hope you're all doing well. Until then, we'll chat soon.